wanderers who incarnate do want to help us. They don't want us to be afraid. They want us to understand that we are loved, and people who've been abducted are traumatized. You know, it's terrible trauma. How can you ever make sense of it and not be afraid? I certainly can understand sleeping with a flashlight and a gun, although I don't know what it would do against an alien. Probably wouldn't do much, but if it comforts him, good. But what I'm talking about is trying to mitigate the fear, trying to have people have hope and feel safe that there is good in the universe. There may be frightening things. There are frightening things, but there is also a tremendous amount of good, and there are higher beings with higher consciousness that are very loving. There's not just the type that want to use humans or experiment on humans or control humans or enslave humans. There are higher dimensional beings who are very, very loving and who play by the rules and who are here among us trying to give us hope, and I tell the story of it in Mission from Venus for people to have hope and for people not to be afraid, just to be more uplifted, because there are many things we don't know, we don't understand, but we can't be paralyzed by our fear. We have to combat our fear, and we have to help people who've suffered the trauma of abduction.
Oh, yeah.
And give them hope, and let them know that they are loved.
Now, I got to ask you another question, because our time is starting. It goes by fast, doesn't it, kid?
It does go by fast.
Now, what is sex in the fifth dimension like compared to our dimension?
Oh, yeah. Well, according to what I've been told, first of all, I'll speak about what they told me about sex in the third dimension, and that is that it's supposed to be, and I think it is for many people, a joyous exchange of energy between beings, in which the masculine, and it doesn't have to be a man and a woman, because there can be a masculine and feminine energy in all of us, where the masculine energy transfers strength and physical energy to the feminine, and the feminine transfers emotional and spiritual energy to the masculine and inspires creativity. The fire that the male offers prevents stagnation in the feminine, and the feminine calms the fire and anger in the male, transmuting it into creative inspiration. And the point of orgasm is the point of exchange. Then in the fifth dimension, this also goes on, although in the fifth dimension we have light bodies. The thing that's an orgasm, as you know, in the third dimension is just a matter of seconds. But in the fifth dimension, orgasm carries one right up into intelligent infinity, into the divine, into a state of timeless ecstasy, because what has been told to me is that the universe dwells in a state of orgasm, in a state of timeless ecstasy, and human orgasm can trigger contact with the divine, with the source, and we too can dwell in a state of timeless ecstasy. And if you're in the fifth dimension, sex brings you there always. But even from the third dimension, orgasm can trigger contact with the divine. Orgasm is the most spiritual feeling we have on this planet. It is a gift. It's almost like I would say a gift from gods, that we have this wonderful thing. So yeah, it's yes, and it's in an exchange which nourishes both people, but it's also a way to contact the timeless ecstasy in which the universe dwells and get into that vibration.
What lies ahead for us?
Why is what?
What lies ahead for us?
Oh, what lies ahead for us? Oh,
yes.
Well, what they've told me is that don't lose heart. All is well. You humans are actually the creators of your life. Use everything that happens to you as a catalyst for your growth, no matter how painful or how frightening. Because even the least conscious among us carries a spark of the divine and will eventually evolve and become enlightened and understand everything that's happened. So that they've also told me that within a few hundred years there will be paradise on earth. We will solve our problems. We will solve our problems with all the earth changes that are coming. And those of us who can hold enough light will be able to continue to incarnate on earth as a paradise. Those of us who have been not engaged in evolving and who can't make the leap to the fourth dimension will not be able to incarnate on earth anymore once earth is a fourth dimensional planet. They will have to find another planet to incarnate on that's still third dimensional until they can hold enough light to reach the fourth dimension, and then they will evolve. Then they can go to a fourth dimensional planet, because you have to match your vibration with the vibration where you're living. So as Earth is moving, even as we speak, into the fourth dimension, which accounts for a lot of the changes on Earth, the beings who are the surface dwellers on Earth, right now humans, we have to be in the fourth dimension too. And many, many humans are moving to the fourth dimension. And the wanderers that I speak of in Mission from Venus are helping more people to move into the fourth dimension, which is a dimension of love for all beings as one. And when we have that consciousness, then we can be in a fourth dimensional planet.
A question, too. Before you were on, I had another guest on, Mary Joyce. She's a world-renowned. She was a reporter for various newspapers. She runs a website on Bigfoot, UFO, Earth changes, and all that stuff. Very well-known lady.
Right.
She just wrote a book about, another book about Bigfoot. Now, I noticed in your thing about Bigfoot, now, are they a humanoid living creature, or are they, from another dimension?
Well, what my understanding about Bigfoot was that 700,000 years ago, there was a planet between Jupiter and Mars called Maldek, and Maldek blew itself up in a nuclear war, and all of the surface dwellers of Maldek, who were at that time high third-dimensional beings, were killed and were only in their light bodies, but because of the nuclear explosion, they were in a very, very tight knot, and for 200,000 years no one could reach them. But after 200,000 years, some of the Council of Nine managed to make contact with them. So 500,000 years ago, they needed a place for these souls to incarnate, but there was a karmic retribution for blowing up Maldek, so they were not given another third-dimensional body. They were given a body of like a Bigfoot creature and allowed to live in the interior of Earth. They were brought to Earth so that 500,000 years ago, so that they could evolve then again into higher third-dimensional and then fourth-dimensional and then on up into the dimensions. So my understanding is that Bigfoot were actual creatures who were originally from Maldek and were given not a human body because they had accrued bad karma for destroying their planet, but they were given a body of a hairy, large creature in a humanoid form, but that they were real beings. Most of them are gone now because they have evolved over the 500,000 years up through the dimensions, but there are probably a few left and there are sightings of them, and they are real creatures. That's my understanding.
Interesting. Now, also, Susan, where is your book available at?
My book is on Amazon, for one. It's also on BarnesandNoble.com. I think it's probably easiest on Amazon, and it's called Mission from Venus.
Interesting. And I got to get a copy myself, actually, because I find it very intriguing talking to you. I like your, the way your view on this is. And I got to ask you a question. How often do they communicate with you? Is it a regular basis, or is it off and on type of thing?
No. Whenever I meditate or sit down to write, I just wait until something sort of drops, and they'll send an image, and then I will write it down. Sometimes I get information in a dream. Sometimes I get it when I'm writing at the computer, but as the more I do it, I realize it isn't just since 2014 that they were communicating to me, but even when I was a young psychologist in private practice 30 years ago, I would feel things drop into my mind that weren't my own ideas, but that would be very helpful. And I understood that I was supposed to say that to the client. But I could tell the difference when it was something that I thought of and something that they were giving me. And then at one point, they said to me, I asked, how can I be most helpful to the people that come to me? And they said, you really can't do anything, but let us work through you. And so I was always tried to be open, even as a psychologist, and often I got help. But I wasn't even really fully realizing how much help I was getting until I started opening to the writing part, which could reach more people.
Well, how old were you when this actually started happening?
Well, I'm 72 now.
You don't sound it. You don't sound it. You sound like...
So I became a psychologist when I was 35. So I think I was around 35 when I first started feeling the presence of other ideas that weren't mine coming into my head. And I started writing in my 60s, probably. I know it's late to get started writing, but better late than never. And I'm so grateful that I stopped being afraid and I just let myself do this. And I'm excited to know what they're going to do for the third book. Because the first book takes place on Venus, Mission from Venus. The second book is called Wanderers on Earth, and it's what happens to those incarnated higher dimensional beings, how they grow up on Earth and how they remember finally that they came from a higher dimension. But the third book, I don't know. I have to wait and see what images they drop into my consciousness.
Interesting. Now, our time, we got like 1 minute left. Do you have a website, Susan?
It's SusanPlunket.com.
And from there...
Plunket has one T.
Okay, and that on your website, what type of stuff do you have on it?
I just have, it's mostly about being a psychologist, but I do have both books listed, and the picture of the cover of both books.
Interesting.
But there's my contact information. If anyone wants, my email is there, my phone number, and the picture of the books, the titles. And it's SusanPlunket.com, and Plunket is just what you'd think, Plunket.
Well, Susan, I really enjoyed having you on. I really recommend...
Thank you, Gary. You have quite a nice voice, too.
Well, I'm really, pretty close to your...
Your voice is very soothing.
I'm very close to your age, believe it or not. I was in retirement, and then 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, my friend calls up and he goes, well, are you done riding your Harleys? Are you done getting ready to kill yourself? And I go, yeah, I don't know. And he goes, get back into radio. And then all of a sudden, here I am again. And I was retired for 10 years.